They will never admit it openly, not in their polished interviews, not in their carefully rehearsed speeches, not in the soft, reassuring language they offer the public. Yet behind locked doors and silent halls, there lingers a quiet tremor, a whispering doubt, a secret fear that the powerful rarely acknowledge even to themselves. What happens if ordinary people finally wake up? This question is the invisible heartbeat of every system built on control, because true control has never been about chains or prisons or visible force. It has always lived inside belief. Inside the unwritten rules people accept without noticing, inside the invisible boundaries society teaches us to obey from the moment we open our eyes. The unsettling truth is that the most unpredictable element in the world is not technology, not politics, not wealth, but the human mind, the spark inside every individual that questions, wonders, resists, and refuses to fully obey the script handed to them. And that spark, that curiosity, is the one force no system can comfortably predict. This is why, throughout history, those who rely on authority have relied even more heavily on illusion, on distraction, on the quiet hope that the population never pauses to ask simple, dangerous questions. Because once one person starts questioning the limits around them, others begin to see cracks in the structure too, and cracks spread with startling speed. You can control bodies, but awareness, true awareness, is slippery, contagious, unstoppable once ignited. And that is the fear the powerful never speak out loud. Not rebellion, not uprising, but understanding. The understanding that many of the restrictions society accepts exist not because they are natural, but because people were conditioned to never challenge them. This chapter examines that first tremor of awakening. The moment an individual begins to observe the world not as it is presented, but as it actually feels. Why would those who sit comfortably at the top fear something as simple as a question? Because every great shift in human history began with one mind noticing something that didn't add up. And the moment a mind awakens, the old rules lose their grip. You can silence a voice, restrict a body, limit a movement, but you cannot silence a mind that has begun to see through the fog. And that, more than anything, is the shadow that haunts the halls of power. The silent architecture of influence that shapes how people think without ever needing to command them directly. Most systems of authority do not operate through loud threats or visible chains. They operate through frameworks so subtle, so ordinary, so woven into everyday life that people rarely notice their existence at all. It is like walking through a maze without knowing you entered one, following lines painted on the ground by someone you never met, obeying rules that feel natural only because they were introduced before you were old enough to question them. This hidden architecture is not built from laws or documents alone. It is built from symbols, expectations, narratives, and habits repeated until they feel like truth. Influence whispers instead of shouts, guiding people towards certain choices while making them believe those choices were entirely their own. That is the brilliance and the danger of subtle control. It does not force obedience. It manufactures it gently, invisibly, through culture, language, belief, and repetition. This chapter explores how a system can shape an entire population without ever touching them directly, simply by shaping what feels normal. Think about it. No cage is stronger than the one that convinces the bird it is free while it sits comfortably inside. Throughout history, Those who study power have understood that controlling perception is more effective than controlling bodies. If people accept a story about how the world works, that story becomes the boundary of their imagination. And once imagination is confined, everything else becomes easier. Yet even the most carefully crafted architecture has flaws, small cracks, faint inconsistencies, little signals that something doesn't fully match the picture painted on the surface. And deep down, many individuals feel those cracks, even if they can't explain them. A strange rule that doesn't make sense, a tradition that feels outdated, a contradiction in what they were taught. These small moments are the beginning of awareness. This chapter invites the viewer to look closely, not at what the system says, but at what the system suggests, to notice how influence works, not through force, but through quiet shaping of thought. And once someone sees the walls of the maze from above, once they recognize the patterns guiding them, the spell begins to break. Because the greatest mystery of influence is this: it only works when people believe it isn't there. As the cracks in the hidden architecture become harder to ignore, Chapter 3 turns to the quiet shift happening within ordinary people, a growing sense that something in the world feels heavier, stranger, more forced than it used to. This awakening is not sudden or dramatic. It begins subtly, like a faint vibration beneath the floor, a soft hum of awareness that something is off. People start noticing contradictions in the rules they were taught to trust, inconsistencies in the narratives repeated by those who claim authority, and a nagging feeling that many of the limits placed on them were never theirs to begin with. An awakening is not simply learning new information. It is the moment when old information stops making sense. It is the realization that the structure guiding a person's life may have been designed for convenience, not truth. And this realization spreads faster than any institution can manage, because once one mind breaks free from mental confinement, others around it begin to question as well. Awakening is contagious, not through rebellion, but through curiosity, through people quietly asking themselves why they feel uneasy in a world that insists everything is fine. When enough people begin to sense this mismatch between the surface and the substance of reality, a collective awareness starts to form, a shared understanding that the world is shifting beneath their feet. This chapter explores how individuals, without planning or coordination, begin to detach themselves from the narratives that once defined their beliefs, slowly stepping outside the boundaries they once accepted without hesitation. Their thoughts travel beyond the lines drawn for them, not because they are told to resist, but because they finally see the lines for what they are. And once someone sees the world from a perspective that wasn't handed to them, the old logic collapses. The systems built to guide behavior become transparent, their intentions visible, their mechanisms exposed. Awakening is the one phenomenon no structure of influence can contain, because it originates inside the individual, an inner shift that no rule or authority can fully control. And as more people experience this quiet internal transformation, the balance of perception changes. The institutions that once felt towering and absolute begin to feel smaller, less certain, less capable of shaping the human mind. This chapter reveals that awakening is not an attack on power. It is simply the natural evolution of awareness. And once it begins, the world can never return to the way it was. By the time awareness begins to spread, something remarkable happens. Voices that once blended quietly into the background begin to echo in ways no system of influence can suppress. And this is where chapter 4 unfolds, the emergence of voices they cannot silence. These voices are not always loud or aggressive. Many of them speak softly, thoughtfully, almost reluctantly. Yet their impact is profound, because they speak from a place no authority can reach, personal truth. As more people awaken, they start expressing ideas that were once hidden in the private corners of their minds, and these ideas begin to resonate with others who have felt the same unspoken tension but lacked the words to articulate it. It is not the shouting that changes the world, but the shared recognition between individuals who realize they are no longer isolated in their questions. The more these voices multiply, the harder it becomes for institutions to maintain the illusion of absolute narrative control. Because influence depends on silence, and silence evaporates the moment honest expression becomes common. In this chapter, we explore how these voices rise not through confrontation, but through clarity, through people speaking from their lived experiences, refusing to perform the roles they were conditioned to play. Systems built on subtle control rely on predictability, on the assumption that people will respond in expected ways. Yet awakening disrupts this predictability. Individuals begin to express themselves without seeking permission or validation. And when enough people speak from this place of internal certainty, traditional power structures struggle to respond. Because these expressions cannot be dismissed as rebellion or chaos, they are simply reflections of human truth. The most powerful voices are often the ones that say things others were afraid to whisper. And once spoken, those truths travel far beyond their origin. Even attempts to suppress them only amplify their presence, because suppression confirms their significance. This chapter shows that the strength of these voices lies not in volume, but in authenticity. And authenticity spreads with a force no institution can fully anticipate. Each voice becomes a signal to others that it is safe to question, safe to think, safe to feel their own perceptions instead of absorbing the ones they are given. Through this rising chorus, a quiet revolution of awareness takes shape, one that cannot be silenced, because it is not a movement created externally, but a transformation unfolding within countless individuals at once. As the chorus of authentic voices grows, Chapter 5 arrives at the conclusion of this unfolding transformation. The realization that the greatest power feared by any system has always been the collective strength of ordinary human beings. Not physical strength, not force, not rebellion, just the simple, undeniable power of awareness spreading from person to person like a quiet awakening. When people begin to see the world not through the lens they were handed, but through the clarity of their own perception, something shifts in the balance of power. The structures that once appeared immovable start to look fragile, not because they have changed, but because people have changed in how they see them. The illusion of authority depends on unquestioned acceptance. Once that acceptance fades, the spell breaks. This chapter explores how individuals, once awakened, begin to connect in ways that transcend old divisions and boundaries, recognizing that the real strength of humanity lies in its ability to think, feel, evolve, and unify without needing permission. The power that institutions fear is not chaos, it is clarity. Clarity that reveals unnecessary constraints, clarity that questions inherited beliefs, clarity that exposes patterns of influence once hidden in plain sight. When enough people possess this clarity, the old systems lose their grip, because their authority relied on a population that never examined the world closely. And now people are examining everything. They are asking questions not out of anger, but out of understanding. They are noticing contradictions not to destroy the world, but to understand it. They are stepping outside the psychological boundaries that once dictated their lives. This chapter concludes by reminding us that human consciousness is not a passive element to be molded. It is an active, unpredictable force capable of reshaping entire eras when awakened. And that is why, beneath the surface, those who rely on rigid systems of control feel uneasy, because awareness spreads silently, naturally, and without a central leader, guided only by truth, recognized within each individual. The greatest power in the world has always been humanity itself, not in the hands of the few, but in the minds of the many who finally begin to see clearly. If you enjoyed this video, and if this message resonated with you, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more content like this.